All set. Apparently we're all set. Thank you so much, ladies and gents, for...
Merci beaucoup, mesdames, messieurs, d'être présents à ce forum européen du cinéma. Je suis Marjorie Paillon et je suis heureuse d'être avec vous. Bien sûr, il s'agit d'un secteur, le secteur du cinéma, qui est en train de se remettre après l'épidémie. Et nous allons parler donc de la façon dont on peut rester compétitif au niveau mondial. Au cours des 2 heures à venir, nous allons aborder tous les sujets possibles concernant les investissements dans des programmes européens. Et nous allons donc parler d'investissement en demandant aux experts, aux professionnels qui travaillent à la création, à la production, à la distribution des films, en leur demandant donc comment tirer le meilleur parti de la situation actuelle. Vous pouvez poser des questions, vous pouvez réagir, poser des questions aux membres du panel. Vous allez voir un QR code à l'écran, vous pouvez scanner ce code et ensuite poser vos questions. Pour ouvrir officiellement cette édition, nous accueillons le commissaire au marché intérieur, Thierry Breton.
Thank you very much. You speak without...
Merci beaucoup. Vous parlez sans aucun accent français, mais moi je vais continuer en français.
Very much, and also commissioner for all the creative industry.
Je suis aussi commissaire pour toute l'industrie de la création. On passe au français.
Very important event, et je suis très heureux d'être avec vous aujourd'hui dans le mythique, qui est le Festival de Cannes, 75e édition. Et vraiment, je tiens à le dire, je remercie beaucoup les organisateurs. C'était pas gagné. On est passé par des moments difficiles. Un grand bravo. Et je vais me permettre de l'applaudir à Pierre Lescure, parce que c'est son travail. On est très content de l'avoir comme président, et puis au délégué général Thierry Frémaux. Je voudrais saluer aussi parmi nous aujourd'hui Salima Yannabou et Laurence Farang, qui sont 2 députées européennes très actives sur le secteur qui vous intéresse. Donc elles sont là, donc si vous avez des remarques et des complaintes à faire, n'hésitez pas. Elles sauront être vos intermédiaires. Et puis on travaille tellement bien ensemble, nous faire savoir, on essaiera de trouver des solutions ensemble aux problèmes que vous voudrez bien nous soulever. Merci aussi à David Lisnard qui nous accueille, maire de Cannes. Je sais qu'il a un agenda très chargé pour accueillir les réfugiés ukrainiens. Un mot évidemment sur la situation particulière dans laquelle nous nous trouvons. L'Europe traverse une crise après l'autre, j'allais dire le monde aussi, et évidemment, on est tous focalisés, à juste titre du reste, sur ce qui se passe à nos frontières, aux frontières européennes, 4 de nos frontières, et derrière lesquelles cette guerre qui continue à se dérouler, qui nous mobilise toutes et tous, et en particulier nous à la Commission européenne, et puis avec nous évidemment l'ensemble des institutions européennes et tout le peuple européen derrière pour faire ce qu'il y a à faire, accueillir les réfugiés, faire en sorte que le pays, malgré la tragédie qu'il traverse, continue à travailler, à fonctionner. C'est pas facile, mais aussi qu'il continue aussi à créer.
And it must continue to create as well. In this context, I'm very happy to welcome the delegation from Ukraine. And we'll be talking later on with some Ukrainian directors. First of all, I'd like to come to my point. I want to talk about the battles we are waging at the Commission, which implicitly are linked to your concerns. We must affirm our European model, in other words, amongst all the values which are the groundwork for our state of law, our democracy. In terms of numbers, we are the biggest democracy in the free world, 450 million inhabitants. We're the biggest democracy, and one should realize this. We're a whole continent with all that that means, and we must play an essential role in terms of the media, the audiovisual sector. The quality of what's produced is the foundation of the link that unites us all. I wanted to restate that today. It's both a goal and a means. It's a complex situation, however. We are complex. We have individual cultures, mutual cultures, and we have to get all this to live together. That makes things complex. That's our ambition, and that accounts for the grandeur of the European goal, live all together on the basis of a dynamic democratic system, as I said. That's very important. Everywhere in the world, as we know, the rule of law is being thwarted and called into question. And that's a line one cannot cross as far as I'm concerned. In whatever we do, we must uphold the rule of law. And culture is the cement that binds together the rule of law. So what have we done? I'll go back over 2 or 3 points. As you know, we have taken a large number of measures to reinforce the audiovisual ecosystem. We've modernized copyright. I'm in a good position to know, as former Minister of Finance, that this is essential. It's essential when it comes to financing creation, financing the creation of films. We have a directive in this area. We had major exchanges with all the players in this sector this morning. I underscored the importance of the SMA directive on audiovisual services. And now we're going to ensure it comes into force as quickly as possible in all the 27 member countries. This should come into force as soon as possible. The industry, the sector, therefore, has been supported during the entire pandemic. That was very important for you, for us. Your sector was heavily impacted. We created what we call an ecosystem comprising all the players that you represent here. Producers, directors, those who are involved in financing, the actors, absolutely everyone, including the distributors, the exhibitors. All this, these sectors were really deeply shaken by the pandemic, whence the support. We needed to put together the instruments to support people to ride through this difficult wave. As you know, we've just reached an historic agreement on the regulation of information and news with the acceptance of DSA and DMA, which are the 2 regulations which will be implemented at the beginning of next year in order to regulate all your field and the big international platforms. It's the end of the Far West in this space, so to speak. Everything that's authorized in the physical world had to be extended to the information world. What you can do in the physical world, you can must uphold in the information world in terms of freedom of expression, freedom of belief, etc. And that's the goal of what will be brought into force. And the big platforms are, of course, involved. So they're welcome to our information space. That's a very important point. It's the biggest information space with 450 million consumers in the democratic Western world. They are welcome, but they will have to apply our rules when they are in Europe. When you're in Europe, you apply European rules. I'm commissioner for the EU market, and these rules must be respected by the platforms. That protects our citizens, it protects our companies, and if they fail to respect it, there will be fines based on turnover, and otherwise they won't be able to be players in Europe. And this is a message to platforms and those who might want to become owners of platforms in the future. These rules were shaped by our democratic space. They now constitute the law and must be respected. The end of opaque algorithms, the end of illicit content, hatred-filled speech, the fight against disinformation, piracy. The idea is to enable each individual fully to control his or her information and information space. This European information space, as I said earlier on, has been the focal point of our work. The companies you represent, the sector you represent, must fully be able to benefit from this single internal market, which comprises cultural, linguistic, and national idiosyncrasies, of course. I have great confidence, despite the high stakes and the geopolitical challenges. I'm confident because Europe is truly an artistic and cultural power. You know this, of course. My role as Commissioner is to transform the message you are all seeking to convey. We have obvious assets, undeniable assets. First and foremost, the diversity and creativity of European talent. The creation of talent is a goal which we must never cease to bear in mind. It's complicated, of course, to foster the emergence of talent. It's complicated to train people, to retain them. But it's a very important challenge. Obviously, I am confident also because we have an ecosystem which is extremely dynamic and active. It received strong support during the pandemic, and we're really truly thinking about the future in this respect. We know that we cannot just feel complacent. Why? Because the ecosystem you represent, like many other ecosystems, in fact, subject to the specificities I recalled earlier on, our sector has very specific traits, and the sector is changing fast. As all major changes, your role, my role, is to help you. My first priority is to consolidate our existing assets. We must focus on our strong points in order to bring about this transition and increase our resilience. That's the purpose of the plan of action on audiovisual media, which I'll be submitting which I submitted in December 2020 and has been rolled out. And here I would like to focus on a couple of special points, namely investment and innovation. The second point is the regulatory framework. Here I would like to mention, obviously, the new proposal on the freedom of the media. With the Media Freedom Act, I'm not going to delve into it at this stage. Let's start with investment. That's the industrial side, in the broad sense of the word, of things. Like all of you, I firmly believe that when it comes to cultural production, it's absolutely fundamental and necessary to maintain a given distance between the governments and the world of creation. And I will make sure that remains the case. These two sectors need each other, but there has to be a distance between them. I'm not trying to say that I want to call into question state funding of audiovisual creation. But the state doesn't have just mercantile interests. The strategic role, which I seek to represent, the strategic role of governments is, in addition to financing, as I've said, to provide a regulatory framework that is conducive to creation. First of all, to preserve our position on the market, our cultural independence in Europe, which I referred to in my introduction. Obviously, we have to strengthen companies that produce European works and enable them to be known everywhere in Europe and abroad. The internal market is a fabulous lever, and indeed, creativity has mushroomed, but we need to find the right market for it, including beyond national borders. We need to use all the instruments that we have at our disposal to this end. We have national recovery plans. They play an essential role in the interaction I had with many of you in the course of the COVID crisis, enabled me to focus on whole areas which are now included in national recovery plans. That means that there's still amounts of money that can be used in member states, and these funds have been earmarked. Of course, you have to go and apply for them, and if you need, I can help you to find these funds. Of course, we work in close relationship with the member states. In this spirit, we have broadened our toolbox, and that's an additional point I wanted to highlight. I've talked with you often during this period, and your industry clearly needs its own equity. That's a major issue and an absolute necessity. In partnership with European Investment Fund, we are therefore launching today the MediaInvest Fund, which is comprises over 400 million euros, and that will be used to support the whole of the audiovisual sector, boost its financing, its assets. That was something that was cruelly lacking, and I believe it's very important for all the players concerned, small companies, bigger ones, medium-sized companies, which make up the bulk of the cultural and audiovisual industry. With MediaInvest, you will be able quickly to find a means to access this first level of financing with a view to increasing equity. To be more specific, MediaInvest will be able to improve the negotiating power of independent production companies. Independent production, that's very important. We have to retain this independence in production. Here again, this increasingly entails significant investment upstream, so we have to increase the amount of equity available. We also have to protect intellectual property rights, ensure these companies remain the owners of their catalog, and enable them to do remakes and also new adaptations of pieces of work, whatever the media. To this end, we're waiting for the signature of the first MediaInvest partnerships as of the second quarter of this year. In the long term, I think we can say that MediaInvest, at least that's how the tool was designed, I think it will help to increase private investment. It will give leverage to companies. This will help to integrate new technologies and will boost innovation. We have to view all this as a major challenge, but a huge opportunity as well. I'd like to touch on another point that's dear to my heart. We want to help the entire sector to transform. As I said, it's in this area that the EU, through this triple transition, the green transition, digital transition, and the increase in resilience, well, the sector as a whole must be helped to manage this triple transition. As you know, we've allocated over 40 million euros to the adoption and use of the most up-to-date modern equipment in artificial intelligence, virtual, augmented reality. We're going to support all these sectors, which are very important and are triggers for change. They're a source of new experiences. They have to be developed. And of course, we also have to do this in Europe. The audiovisual sector, as we know, has been able to take up these new technologies. Our cultural autonomy is at stake. Look at what has happened, is happening in other areas like the metaverse. So we have to be very watchful indeed when it comes, and we are watchful in my departments. We want to move into this other dimension. I'd like to welcome the work being done by the Virtual and Augmented Reality Coalition. This has enabled 40 organizations to become engaged. They have teamed up with a good roadmap, the idea being to gain a European position on this market which will be absolutely essential and which is important if we are to retain our independence in the cultural sphere. I spoke this morning with a number of European startups, and next to the film market, and dropped by. It's a very interesting thing to visit. There's a wealth of innovation, and this holds out great hope. Now I come to my last point. Here I'd like to refer to a very special field which is extremely important for us and which is related to your activity, the Media Freedom Act. I'd like to touch on this because it's an extraordinarily important topic in the world in which we now live. The problem of freedom of the media, freedom of expression, fake news, propaganda, war propaganda, constantly crop up, just to mention a couple of subjects. A lot of our European citizens encounter issues in all these areas on a daily basis. This topic is closely bound up to our project, the state of law, our democracies. It's our duty, therefore, to provide for the media, the freedom of the media. I don't need to go back to all the reasons I sketched out earlier on. What's of paramount importance for me is the following. Culture is the foundation that enables us all to live together. Because we are able to live together despite all our differences, we can build a stronger future together. And this is closely bound up to the rule of law. We need to have a rich public debate. People need to be properly informed. We have to teach the younger generations what it means to be properly informed in order to make a free choice. You can make your choice because you're enlightened. You know about things. Men and women of the 22nd sessions must be able to choose their own path in the sphere of information. Things go viral. I think much debate will ensue still on these matters. We have to teach people as of a very young age how to contend with this profusion of news and fake news. Media. The media must be free and independent. Are all our media free and independent in Europe? I'm asking the question. I'm not sure the answer is yes, but we need to work on all this, and that's the purpose of the Media Freedom Act. All the journalists who do this job to inform us freely and independently must be able to do this freely and independently across Europe. Yet some people have to risk their lives, even in Europe. That should not be the case. We live in the biggest democracy in the world, so this is an essential topic we need to manage firsthand. This is a right, the right to information. It's one of our values. I'm very frank. You shouldn't take this for granted. It's an ongoing fight. So I would just like to say that it's in this context that we shall be holding a consultation, which is still underway. If you have ideas to submit, they're most welcome. All good ideas are welcome. It's a bit like what we did for the other major regulations we proposed. And then this will be submitted to the Euro MPs. Obviously, the Parliament will have a word to say in the matter. Also, the European Council. This phase of co-creation is very important. We will work closely with Parliament to see how we're going to deal with this matter. We already have rules. We already have certain paths, which I can mention. The rules of the game have to be fairer, that's quite obvious, and they have to be in phase with modern society. There's also an internal market for the media. There is an internal market when it comes to freedom of expression. So obviously we have to ensure this freedom of expression is upheld and guaranteed through this new legislative act, which should provide a better guarantee for the editorial independence of written press vis-à-vis shareholders or other entities. Pluralism is very important. I'm deeply attached to pluralism. Pluralism is absolutely essential to democratic life. And also, and I'm speaking very frankly, we must fight against any form of interference, be it private or public. So that's the current state of affairs. I'm not going to speak at any greater length. We all realize we're living in a very complex, agitated time that is very difficult. And as European Commissioner, I am preparing us all collectively because we must realize this period may last. There may be some surprises. Things may go back to what they used to be. Personally speaking, I have doubts. That's not my frame of mind. When I carry out my job in the interests of all and your interests. You have the pandemic, the war in Ukraine, the undermining of certain democratic values, foreign influences in Europe. These are many topics on which we and I am working in a determined way. And I'm trying to react quickly. So I shall be working along these lines in the interests of the sector you represent. I'm fully aware of the challenges you are facing. I also know the full importance of what you represent in terms of our democracy, our values, and our sovereignty, and our reputation abroad. We're not an island, of course. When in the world of creativity, you think about the world. I can also help you to have this world vision, this European and world vision. It's quite a far-reaching program, and you can certainly count on me. And once again, I believe that there is not a better place on earth than here to say this. Under the presidency of Pierre Lescure, and soon Iris Knobloch. Thank you.
Merci, cher.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Breton.
So we have to be agile and creative for some reason. And now, how to bridge the financial gap in the AV sector by stimulating more investment? Well, that's definitely one of the key takeaways from Commissioner Breton's speech. So we now have a tool for that, of course, and this first ever equity investment instrument is called MediaInvest. Let's learn more about the opportunities it has to offer with Laurent Braun, Head of Business Development at the EIF, European Investment Fund.
Good afternoon, everyone. Bon après-midi. I wrote my speech in English, so if you don't mind, I will do it in English. I'm actually replacing our Chief Executive Officer who couldn't make it today. Alain Godard is the Chief Executive of the European Investment Fund. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. He has a few words that he wanted me to read, and which I'll try to give you now before I go to my main speech. He says the following: Let me first thank you, and this is also obviously to the Commissioner in the session we just had, for sharing this your vision, your action plan, and for setting the stage for what you have in mind for the audiovisual sector and for European culture in general at a critical time in Europe. This is a MediaInvest will be a fundamental game changer in the financing of this activity, and this is thanks to the MediaInvest program of the European Commission. As we, EIF, successfully implemented other strategic European programs together in the area of space, for instance, EIF will leverage on its expertise in the audiovisual sector and its unique strength in the equity business to invest and to mobilize private investors to support the audiovisual industry for a total amount of 400 million. As I said, due to the EIF board, he sends his apologies for not being able to join us today. So I'll now move on to the second speech, my speech. So good afternoon again. And I'll talk about, of course, MediaInvest this afternoon. I'll talk a bit about how we see the program working. But maybe before I jump straight into MediaInvest, if you allow me, I'd like to spend a couple of seconds on another program which was launched a couple of years ago, back in 2017. We were here in Cannes, in the same rooms, presenting the Cultural and Creative Sector Guarantee Facility. At the time, this was the first time that the European Commission put in place a guarantee program at European level. With this program, we have provided guarantees to more than 20 banks and financial institutions across Europe. The program itself was fairly modest, an amount of 250 million, but thanks to this program, we could guarantee a portfolio of loan of 2.5 billion. And so I think you can call that a fairly efficient use of public resources. This program will be continued. It will be continued in the InvestEU, which is the new program for the period 22 until 27. It will be scaled up. So we're very happy that it was a success and that we can continue it. I mention it because it's obviously complementary. CCS guarantee program is about guarantee, it's about debt financing. Today we're talking about equity, we're talking about risk capital. And as the Commissioner explained, this is part of a wider ambition. This is part of an ambition to, as he used the words, to leverage, right? To leverage the financing and to ensure that we can leverage the overall financial means that are available for the sector. As I mentioned, MediaInvest is part of the InvestEU program. And InvestEU, for those of you who are not familiar with it, it's basically the big flagship program of the European Commission, which is a multi-billion program which is addressing a number of sectors. Media and audiovisual sector is one of them, but there are a number of other ones that are addressed. And this program will run until the end of 2028. EIB Group is European Investment Bank, European Investment Fund, are co-investing alongside this program and are also managing it, so we're responsible for its deployment. As I said, we are providing financing alongside the Commission. That's one contribution. The second contribution is that in this specific case of the media program, it will be the European Investment Fund that will manage it. European Investment Fund, for those of you who don't know us, is a partnership between the European Investment Bank, the European Commission, and a number of public and private banks. And we are specialized in the financing of smaller businesses and of smaller projects. So why equity? I think, I don't need to explain to you the sector. I think you know it much better than I do. I don't need to explain to you the transformation. Commissioner touched about a number of those transformations, so I will not go, obviously, into them. What I will say is that from a rather narrower view of an investor, media and audiovisual is perceived as fairly complex, highly specialized, fairly risky. Success is not guaranteed, and the risk return may not be there if you balance all the elements. That's at least the way a number of equity investors will look at it. And clearly, the situation with COVID has not improved the situation, as I guess you, again, all know very well. From our perspective, I think the evidence of this is that through the hundreds of funds in which we invest, and we've been operating for the past 20 years, so we've invested, I believe now, in close to 1,000 funds, media features very, very rarely. It's one of the sectors that is the least present. We have a lot of technology, we have a lot of all sorts of sectors of the economy. You think about it, you name them, pretty much all sectors of the economy. Media doesn't feature very strongly. And not only that, but there are very few funds that are specialized in this area. You can literally count them on the fingers of one hand. So, and we believe, in a way, this can be ironical, because there's probably, and there surely is a way, and there are examples of sound investments that can be made in the sector, provided they're done professionally, with the right level of expertise and the right level of knowledge. So I think this is why MediaInvest is here. How will we implement it? Well, we will implement it by investing in funds or co-investing alongside funds. And there are three important elements in this respect. The first one is that those funds will in turn invest in portfolios of companies. Portfolios can be slates of movies. This is open, but it has to be portfolios. And that's important because by investing in portfolios, we improve obviously, we diversify. So we improve the risk profile, and by improving the risk profile, you can improve the risk return proposition to investors. Same story as in technology, by the way. Second, this means that to run those funds, we need fund managers. We need people who know the sector, people who are specialists of this sector, people who have a strong knowledge, people who can implement solid investment strategies, people who will also be innovative and do things that have maybe not been tried before, or that will have an impact on the industry. And I really hope that some of our future fund managers are in this room today. Thirdly, we will also collectively be able to attract other investors, private investors, and this is what this is all about, ultimately. This is about scaling up. This is about leveraging resources. You have your own means, you have your own networks, you have a certain financing capacity. With this, you can attract additional investors with more resources in order to do more films, or to do them better, or to fund them better. And this is crucial. And this is how we will get to having a meaningful impact and to the amounts that we talked about earlier. Another element that I would like to mention is capacity building. It's a bit of a barbaric term, but effectively what it is advisory support. This means that there is also a budget sitting next to the financing itself, in which you can tap and which you can use in order to raise awareness, in order to in order to improve the investment readiness, in effect, of certain proposition. This advisory budget was already used in the context of the guarantee facility. It was actually very, very effective. It was in very high demand, and I believe it added value. So I would also invite people who are interested to consider that. Now, this is, we believe, a model that works. You may ask, why do we do it this way? Well, I think the reason is that fundamentally we have seen that this is a model that works. This approach where we invest in funds, work alongside professional commercial fund managers, where we leverage private investors and private investment alongside us, has proven very powerful. It's the approach we have applied for the past 20 years in a number of sectors, in a number of asset classes, you could say. In that respect, I always like to make the parallel to the venture industry. 20 years ago, venture capital, so technology, right, investing in high tech in Europe, was frankly relatively, I wouldn't say anecdotal, this would be a bit too harsh, but it was quite small. It was a cottage industry. It was, we're talking about not very large amounts, and frankly, the returns were not very good either. And so because the returns were not very good, there were not a lot of investors, a bit the chicken and the egg, right? It was a dwarf compared to the US. We were a complete dwarf. 20 years later, the evolution is astounding. It doesn't mean we have caught up on the US, not yet. But in certain respects, we have. For example, in terms of return, we have caught up with the US. So we have significantly narrowed the gap. This has taken a lot of time and effort. This has taken a lot of very highly qualified people to be entrepreneurial and set up those funds that I was talking about. The other evolution that we've seen is one of investors targeting more and more specific areas, targeting more and more specialized areas which require specific knowledge, specific skills. Funds investing in natural resources, funds investing in medical technologies, funds investing in the blue economy, funds investing in the space sector. These are all examples of such more targeted, types of approach, thematic, as we call them. And we believe that's important because with these funds and these fund managers, we believe they are best placed to provide the best financing solutions to their industries, since they know those industries best, and they will typically very often come from those industries themselves. So I hope we can replicate all that. I hope the success we had with venture capital, we can replicate it here, and I hope we can also replicate it in terms of the thematic strategies that we could, or let's say the specialized investments we could have in a number of sectors. So I think the opportunity is there. Now, concretely, this is the theory. You're going to tell me what's the practice. Well, the practice is very simple. You go on our website, and on our website you will find a section which is called InvestEU, and in there you will find all the details. You will be able to see all the details of the program, and you will be able to apply. Of course, we don't function as a mailbox. So when you apply, we get in touch, we talk, we sit around the table, and we see what your plans are. Oscar, one of my colleagues, is here today and will tell you more about it. I was also asked to briefly introduce the two panels. So I understand there will be now... Actually,
Laurent, I'm going to take on the job
so then I will just conclude.
I'll conclude. We're pretty out of schedule, so we really need to move on.
Okay, so I'll conclude. I'll just say just a final word of thanks. Thanks to you, first of all, for being here today and for listening to me. Thanks also to the European Commission, because I think it's important that we all recognize that by launching such a program, the Commission is really demonstrating that it is highly innovative and that it can lead the way. So that's my conclusion. Many thanks for your time and for the opportunity to speak to you today. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laurent. And yes, indeed, we're definitely going to dive in the details now. Again, the program is pretty packed, so time flies by on this stage. So why investing through MediaInvest, and actually who needs it? Let's hear from the professionals who are empowering the AV sector. Time to pitch. Well, our very first panel, Oscar Fares for the EIF is going to join us and dive into the details, of course. Jan Mosto for Beta Film, and Tanumiri Mari Tuominam, RPRVC, of course, is one of the investors who can definitely tell us more about the way we can make the most of such a powerful tool. And as we all said, of course, you'll have the opportunity to ask your questions or reactions to our panelists by the end of this very pacey panel. Again, if you want to, just throw your question, just do it on the app, and I'll do my best to be your spokesperson in here. So Jan, probably let's start with you, because of course you're one of the most famous producers in Europe. And from that very perspective, what do you think MediaInvest may be useful as an initiative right here, right now, to, again, ignite the creative industry sector?
It's very simple. It can help to reinforce producers or production companies, means producers. This is the equity part. So in order to put them into the position not to do more, because I think it's not, the question is not how to produce more in Europe. I think the question is, or the challenge, how to produce better, and better means how to produce for larger than national market. So, and as I believe that the producer is the key of the system, key factor of the system, if we reinforce, or if program like that reinforce producers' position through more equity into the companies, through whatever, and enables him to work differently and to create programs which will touch what has been said before by both speakers, means to create something which has international appeal, to create programs out of Europe with international potential, and to increase the possible income from other ways of exploitation. That would be a big result. Now, the question would be how, and I think what's very important, as far as I understood the program, it's open. It gives many possibilities to create and to work on that together. But I think there should be certain principles which should make this money different from other money trying to get into the sector. Because I do not want to offend anyone who is willing to give or to put money into the system. But the money is not the main issue today, even if because there is a lot of money, investment funds going into the system, all the KKRs and whatever the name is, investing, are now putting together with Banijay 2 billion something, SPAC, and so far and so on. So it's really, the money is going into the business. The question is under what conditions for those who are supposed to take it money in order to achieve goals which we all agree upon. I think it has to be fast. It has to be non-bureaucratic. I think it has to combine two elements and reflect the dual nature of our industry, which is obviously industry and means has to guarantee the return of investment. But in order just to remind one of the basics of our industry, at the beginning are not figures. At the beginning, as Sam Spielberg said, is the world. That means, but at the beginning there is an idea. So the way how the industry is functioning is very simple. Someone wants to realize his dream, and if this fund becomes something which can be complementary to the efforts of producers, and I see some of them here, and to accompany them in order to create something which can generate income. This is obviously interesting and important for the investors. Then it can work. And in order to do that, and this is my last point, you need, or the system which is being put in place needs another player, so not only producer on one side and financiers or bank or fund or whatever on the other side, but also I think industry expertise, which has to be part of this decision-making process.
So you'd rather describe MediaInvest as a sparring partner, basically, of the entire industry, like really trying to be side by side with the producers, the distributors, the creators to make it happen for real?
Yes.
Absolutely. Tanu, Matti, actually, you've been investing and you've been actually, witnessing what's happening with the media program for several years. You're a pioneer, if I can say so, to this regard. And how do you think MediaInvest can actually play an additional part in the AV equity financing market?
Thank you. And I think we have now 2 capital funds and close to 100 million from institutional investors under management. And it might sound big sum, but there is still much larger need for the proper venture investments. I think MediaInvest has the opportunity to activate new private investors to invest in the media space. Because I'm a venture capitalist with a creative director background, and I often see there is some kind of cultural conflict or discussion, at least, between the creators and the production companies and the capital. Because if the companies just want production services and they need a budget for their next project, and after they have collected that, then they need project capital for the next project. But they don't not necessarily create an IP portfolio or create company value for the production company. And but if the companies want their own IP and IP catalog and build long-lasting business, then the MediaInvest can be the tool for that. But our customer is the fund investor, and that's how we see it. Yeah.
And we'll definitely dive into more questions about the IP with our second panel. But Oscar, I definitely see you taking a lot of notes in between Jan and Tanu, Matti here, because of course the EIF wants to be that very sparring partner when it comes to empowering creative industries and fostering better, faster innovation at a global scale, I guess. On a very, very concrete level, what should potential applicants to MediaInvest know when they're actually trying to apply to the program?
That's a very good question, and Laurent referred to one of the first elements, which is to know what we are looking for, and that's all on our website, so please take a careful look at that. There's a lot of information, but more particularly, and also linking to what has been said now and in the previous speeches, we look to select financial intermediaries that can really add value to the industry. So not just, let's say, pure financiers, but really teams that know about the industry, know how they can add value to the companies in which they will invest equity. And with that, reinforce, obviously, the ecosystem by balancing finding a better balance between supply of capital and demand of capital. And that's what we have been doing, as Laurent also referred to in the venture capital industry, where basically we cornerstone the industry from, let's say, nothing to 100 billion euros industry last year. And that's, let's say, also should be the starting point to follow the same route or similar route in the audiovisual industry. Also about the process, maybe a little bit. Once we start receiving applications, and the call is open, so please let's start. Do send us your proposals and let's start a dialogue. It's not just a black box. We're happy to speak to you directly, have meetings, talk about how can you structure the proposal. But we go through several stages. So first we pre-select financial intermediaries, and then we go into a very deep due diligence process. We spend a couple of days with the team in their offices, talking to everyone in the team, learning about the value add, how they can really serve the purpose of the MediaInvest program. And after that, then we have all our approvals by our governing bodies, and then we enter into the legal negotiations to set up the vehicle, and hopefully and luckily then start investing together.
So there are real humans behind those inboxes, which
Indeed.
is a good thing. Jan, you wanted to react.
No, I just wanted to ask who can apply. Can I use this opportunity and to try, could I apply? I am not...
Would better film apply? Wow, yeah, sure. Why not?
No, it's a very concrete question.
Absolutely.
Because you speak about financial intermediaries or something like that. So who can apply? I think it's important.
Absolutely.
Can industry, someone who pretends of being in the industry, could we create a fund alone or with someone and apply and get 25% of the 100, and we would find 50 and get financial investor, the other 25. Do you want the name of the fund? I can give you already.
Yeah, I can.
You have to go through the inbox.
That will be the first application to the program. So,
no, I would like to be the first application, but the positive one.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's even more important than being the first one, indeed. But yeah, that's a very good question, and the short answer is yes, you can.
Okay, I will.
Okay, good. So we, when we refer to financial intermediaries, we mean that in the end we need to have a fund structure, an investment vehicle that we will channel the money into companies or production projects. But who's behind those investment funds? That's open in a sense, and even more particularly for MediaInvest. So in some thematics like tech, life science, etc., we've been very careful with having, let's say, industry players in the investment funds, because that might lead to certain conflict of interests. And we want in the end create success stories in the companies itself, not in the backers of the fund, let's say in the industrial backers of the fund. But that we understand the complexity of the audiovisual industry, and there's certain flexibility there. So absolutely, yeah, that would be something that would be feasible.
Thank you.
There you go.
May I
okay,
go
you
home?
drop the mic. There you go. Well, actually, I got a lot of other questions, but if I do hear you well, Oscar, out there, you are referring to the way that venture capitalists actually have built also in Europe, and the EIF has been one of the powerful part of bringing together the tech ecosystem. I don't know if we can draw a parallel with the creative industries itself, but are you trying out there to, I don't know, put together the next unicorns when it comes to creative industries through MediaInvest?
Yeah, why not? I mean, I think we need to be ambitious in Europe, and we can. In the tech industry, nobody believed in Europe some years ago. Now it's clear that we can create technology category, global category leaders from Europe, even related to media, let's say Spotify's, Shazam's, and that's possible. So I think we need to be ambitious, definitely.
Let's open the question to Tanu, Maria, of course, and Jan, but there's also this context when it comes to creative industry, especially in Europe, where concentration is more and more the new norm. Would MediaInvest prevent the industry from being totally concentrated? Would it preserve competition inside the sector?
I think now when there is a content boom, and there is a boom with video on demand platforms, which they are all American. But the good thing in that is that there is no single winner. So it's much more diverse business than internet businesses earlier. So I think that's a good starting point, because there are then more possibilities, and there is real competition, which is not in internet businesses like e-commerce or search engines or social media. They are big monoliths. So, but I think what is possible, it's depending on the added value what the company does. If MediaInvest is also only a filler in the production budgets and the IPs are not kept in the companies, but they go for the platforms and big studios, then the added value of the immaterial rights goes out of the company. So it doesn't scale. Mm-hmm. It's a production budget, and that money we already have. There are several banks and other institutions who already give it for the small added value or small interest or high interest, of course, money for the project financing with low risk. Mm-hmm. But we venture capitalists or private equity investors, we take more risk because because there is more risk, there is a demand for the high upside. Uh-huh. So this is how investment theory goes. That if low risk, banks get guarantees, they get with a 15 to 20% interest rate money for the project. That's not our business. But our business is to make high multiples with higher risk and building something new and big.
And of course, as a fund manager, taking risks is basically your day-to-day job, Mari.
Yeah.
So,
and we also invest by ourselves with our own capital as every VC fund. So we have the aligned interest with the capital we use.
So if I hear you well again, I mean, we need to set high ambitions for MediaInvest, not only in terms of financial tool to sparring part with the creative industries, but also to try to defend out there a perspective of what European creative industries and content could actually be. Jan, that gives me the opportunity to follow up with you, actually, because of course we're all looking out there for the secret recipe to create more high quality and budget, high-end projections, of course, with the possibility to circulate globally. Would MediaInvest be, again, a driver in this regard?
I don't know if MediaInvest will be the driver or even a game changer, because the game has been, played for quite a long time, but it can bring additional elements. I think there are some irrational elements which we should perhaps mention, which is the ambition. And I think a program like that can also motivate European producers, which is very important. As far as your other not question, but what you mentioned before, the point is concerned consolidation against independent producers. I think it's a wrong question. Or it's not either or. I think we will have, the consolidation is happening, and we will face not simple years in terms of production, as producers already start to feel, because the number of total commissions will reduce. If you look at what's happening with Netflix and how HBO Max is reacting and so far and so on. So this paradise where there is an unlimited amount of money available for productions will not continue. But it doesn't mean that even if after the consolidation, we come back, it will be higher than before. So there is space, but I think the challenge is to do better. And I am repeating, and in that, this can be a motivation. The second issue is, you mentioned high ambition. So I would say high end. So also to understand where the money does go in. I am not sure if there is a necessity to finance normal series through a vehicle like that in Europe, because they are still, you can finance them easier out of the market. High end, which is the competitions field, I see Marco Jimenez there, a producer from Gomorrah, this is the highest end you can imagine. So here, I think an instrument like that can help, definitely.
If we do set the right ambitions.
Yes.
And, you know, the faster and, you know, sky's the limit, if I do hear you clearly again.
And high end means also more money for the production, which then has to be recouped through, so you need a feeling for the market, and you need also luck, because we are not making refrigerators. There you need luck also. But, so we have also this irrational element, but this is nothing new. I think what's new is the level. Yeah. And I think, and this is the last thing, there is space there is space for small independent producers, because creativity is linked to people, not to organizations. So it's also how to organize creativity. So I think it may be different. Perhaps the individual producers may start working definitely with existing larger units. But this is the most important asset, I mean, the talent. And just in the end, before I leave, I think the next years will be about content.
Yeah.
This is definitely till now the industry, and I have been in the industry for several years.
We won't say how many, of course.
No, I can tell you, for 40-something. Recent years were very much driven by technology. And I think the technological development, even if new things and so on, this is done. Yeah, so it's there. I mean, that will develop, but who will deliver the right content and with the right people and under the right condition, and will be able to finance, so on and so on. Yes, and all the activity is going to be more complex. So it's the same, but on another level. And I think joint forces in order to finance, in order to distribute, in order to protect and to guarantee the IPs and so on and so on. So it's the same game, but on another level. So we all have to learn.
Absolutely. Well, again, it's 2022, so we have to keep being agile, creative, and of course the landscape is changing. The consolidation won't stop, but we can actually pick up some really interesting tool to, like try to keep, the higher end on the content we're actually delivering to audiences, because what we're doing out there is just telling stories, and the most beautiful ones to the wider and the most beautiful audiences who wants to engage in this story with us. Before we actually do dive into your questions on the Slido app, let me have a quick reaction with you, Tanu, Maria, and Oscar, to what Jan was diving into.
I think there will be always a technological changes. What will happen in 3 to 5 years? We don't know that yet. We can see from now to 3 years maybe that with the internet distribution, what happens there. But then there are new technologies, and it's no coincidence that Facebook changed its name to Meta. There must be something else than just a name. And the gaming industry's methods are used now in film production. The gaming industry can make something big with it also for the film industry. So there are possibilities and changes coming, and those changes are always a place where you can build something new. If film industry would be the same in 1930s, it was kind of ready then, but still it wasn't. And I'm happy that there is a change always.
No, just to make it clear, I just wanted to say the attention was on the technology side, and the attention will shift perhaps more to the content. That was my point. I was not saying that the technology will not continue developing. But the point is that we have to change the way how things are being done and so far and so on, even if storytelling is the most ancient art, and it depends very much from when do I start, when do I get, and so on. But no, it's very much about change and mutation. Right.
And the way both can converge into the metaverse, if I can hear it clearly again, Tanu, Mari. Let's take some of the questions you actually posted on the Slido app. There's definitely one for you, Oscar, out there. How EIF would value pan-European investment funds?
In terms of geographical reach of the investments, no, absolutely. I mean, we are very, very positive, and we are a pan-European institution, so we aim at covering all the markets. We just need to make sure that whoever team is applying for that pan-European investment strategy has the right skills or channels to get to the right projects in the different geographies. But that's absolutely something we are delighted to see.
Another question again, what the appetite from private equity funds for the audiovisual sector? I get the question is to you, Tanu, Mari, and to Oscar too.
Okay, so we've been quite lucky with a bit of fundraising with our two existing funds, so close to 100 million. It's from the institutional investors like pension funds, family offices, foundations, insurance companies. And they look us in the same way as they look for the technology or property fund. So we are an alternative investment asset class for them, which has a sector-specific focus. And for the investors, it's a new possibility to invest in the audiovisual sector, which didn't exist earlier. We are kind of a bridge between our strategic partners of companies. They need a strategic capital, and our investors need profits for the alternative assets class, and we combine these. That's our task. And the idea of a venture fund, if somebody doesn't know, is that first it's a limited time, like 10 years. First there is capital, and in the end there should be more capital.
Absolutely.
That's our business model.
Well,
New one.
Capital, yeah. Exactly. Oscar, maybe a quick word with you.
Yeah, just to complement what Tanu said. I mean, our goal as a public investor is precisely to catalyze private money into this type of funds, and we do that by taking the same risk and same reward as private investors. So, in a sense, giving them confidence that we obviously want to make it sustainable and want them to win and us to win as well. So that's also the whole purpose of our public-private partnership model.
Win-win situations. Last question on Slido, actually. Do I understand correctly, and it's not my question, that the investment will be in companies rather than in projects?
No. So there is the possibility that the financial intermediaries, so the investment funds, invest in companies, but also in audiovisual production, whatever form it takes, whether it's a SPV, special purpose vehicle, or another type of structure.
So the good takeaway from this panel is, yes, Jan, you can apply to MediaInvest, and you definitely will. And thank you so much again, Oscar, Tanu, Mari, and Jan, for this very first panel and perspective on how we can drive the change with MediaInvest, even though the situation is is very same thing. Thank you so much, guys. You are released from duty on this stage, and we'll move on to the next panel. I told you it's kind of pacey this afternoon. And moving on, as you know, in this industry, of course, the IP is key, but is it as simple as it sounds? How to convert IPs right into cash and future hits? Let's see if intellectual property exploitation can be a driver for more diversified investment and strategies with Karine Hanel from Wildside, Alexandra Lebray from the European Producers Club, and Rein Ranu from California, and I love this name. Yeah, watch out, there's surprises beyond your chairs. So this festival is full of surprises, huh? So we'll focus on the IP because, of course, it's a crucial question, and we were tackling it a little bit with Tanu Mari a few minutes ago. But let me start maybe with you, Karine, because, of course, Wildside, your company is truly global. And from a strategic perspective, and when you're operating around the globe, what is the importance of IP valuation in the audiovisual business?
I don't think it's really about us being a global company. That's the importance of IP for all production, audiovisual production, TV and films, are really the foundation. I think it was already said in the previous panel, but that's really how it is. We start from the IP. And as producers, we are the one really scouting for IP, creating IP, or at least financing talents that create IP for us. And that then follow us through the whole production chain, from development, script to screen, really. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so the business is depending on that, on the IP.
And the fact that you're so fiercely defending the IP is of course, very crucial when it comes to fostering, this ecosystem as a more pan-European, as a more, like competitive sector. Let me turn the question to Alexandra, because of course the European Producers Club is a great observatory of the EU market. Are European companies in a good position to exploit their IPs competitively?
IP is my favorite subject, as you know. Usually when people is saying IP is looking at me, so and not because of IP, also because I represent the independent producers, IP equal IP. Mm-hmm. That's my favorite math. IP, and we should maybe say asset, because we are speaking about investors, are assets. And to tell just an example, Coda and the film that was opening the Cannes Film Festival are remakes, so they were based on existing IP. The situation of the independent producers today is not very good in terms of competitiveness, because with the streamers, we all know that come their business model, which is a producers for hire model, where the producers doesn't own any IP, any remuneration, that is proportionate to the success, and no other rights. So the situation is not good, and it reminds me what happened in the UK before the introduction of the UK Terms of Trade. When Channel 4 was created in 1992, with some strong investment obligation, it allowed the UK industry to bloom, and many independent producers were created. But as long as the broadcasters were owning the rights, it didn't compete internationally. And not even with the 25% investment obligation that were imposed to that broadcaster, which reminds us the AVMS directive that we have in Europe. But it was not enough, and we had to wait for the introduction of the obligation for broadcasters to negotiate terms of trade with independent producers, allowing them to own the rights and to exploit them, to see these companies growing, being bought, independent producers being bought by big group. And I agree with you, Jan. That's something that we need to, that's an objective for the independent producers. We need our industry to grow and to be more competitive internationally. And for that, we need to have IP, we need to have a legislation, an obligation of legislation, I'm looking at you because he is the legislator, to introduce terms of trade that protects the rights of the producers. Because investors, they need to have an asset. And if we don't have asset, we are no one for investors. Shall I continue? Or, I can continue forever.
I totally know that, Alexandra. But I mean, so the thing is, which is crucial, to drive the conversation here for this edition of the European Film Forum, you're just telling us that rather than a financial tool, you'd rather have another piece of regulation being introduced to protect the IP fiercely?
Come on, I want to have the two of them. And I want to have, even more. I think first the basis should be to have that, terms of trade that regulates the contractual relation between independent producers and streamers, but then also to have access to that kind of tools, because we need to be ambitious in the project, we need to have money, we need to create IP. IP has never been so expensive to create, because there's a lack of talent, because we need to be, to invest more, and in order to have one IP commission, we need to develop 10. So it's a work that is engaging a lot of money, and so we absolutely need to have that media investment tool. But we need to be sure. I'm looking at you now, that this investment tool, that this money is going into the right direction, meaning in the independent producer, in the independent production or distributor. Sorry, we need to be sure that it helps the sector to keep the IP. and not to see a streaming, production, service taking advantage of it. Sorry, they don't need our money. They don't need the investment of Europe and the public money. So for me, there is two levels, of code of fair practice. First, between the independent producers and the streamer, and secondly, between obligation that you can put on the funding, the companies that you are going to fund.
So sorry, Anne, but it brings me back to my previous question about the fact that the media investment tool could be an anti-consolidation tool too at the very same, time, right?
Yes.
And that's definitely what the European Producers Club is defending out there.
Absolutely. We are defending any business model that is helping us to be ambitious and to create, to not be dependent on the streaming producers for hire model.
So this is definitely something that we have to put on the to-do list of Oscar out there, and of course Laurent and the EIF when it comes to better, fostering the application to the MediaInvest tool. But Laurent was also mentioning something really important in his keynote speech, which is the IP portfolio. And there's a lot of different, definition of what the portfolio means in terms of IP. There is sequels, there is commercial, there is sales, licensing, joint ventures, name them. How can we better foster IP portfolio through this very new financial tool? It's definitely a question open to the entire panel. So who wants to answer first, please? Rain?
Hello, well, I'll start a little bit further back then. I've been starting out my career as a technology entrepreneur, then I became a successful technology investor. I've invested in quite a few unicorn technology companies, but also I started as a hobby filmmaker about 10 years ago, and now I've evolved into running the first film fund in Estonia. That does equity investments into film projects, and I now spend most of my time on the films. So I have seen kind of like the both sides of what the previous speakers mentioned about technology and also the creative industry. And I completely agree with Alexandra in a sense that in a technology company, if you are a founder and you make something that a lot of people consume and use, you are monetarily very well compensated because you are owner of that content. Whereas in films, oftentimes, it's not the case. The platforms, the distributors, whoever you sell it to may get to be the owners. And as a creator, writer-director, you might not be as well compensated necessarily that it is in tech companies. So that is clearly a very, very important topic. But now coming to the IP question, I think as a filmmakers and in Europe especially, I think for us IP is maybe a little bit different than it is maybe commonly in the US, whereas in US when you talk about IP, you talk about the superhero movies, the Marvels, the content, something pre-existing things primarily. And we obviously don't have that in Europe that much, and I argue that maybe we shouldn't. Our IP is our creators, our directors, our actors, our DOPs, all the writers, all the creative people who work on the movies. And for us, it at least in our fund, it always should be the creation first, the movie first, the content. I don't like the word content even. The piece of art first, the creativity that goes into it, and then the second question should be that okay, if I'm creating this that I want to create, is there also a market for it? Can we make it bigger? Can we make a sequel? What not? Can we, attract private investment? Should we attract private investment to make that happen? But it always should start from the creation and not the other way around than it maybe often is. Maybe generalizing, but in US often maybe it starts from the other way around as opposed to Europe in general. Mm-hmm. But I think how we do it in Europe is actually pretty good in that regard. And I hope with the new instruments that they don't force us too much to be like America, but maybe find our unique way of doing things here in Europe.
Yes, of course.
Yes, just to follow up, I totally agree with the creation is the first thing we should look at, absolutely. But I also think that we should develop the expertise in keeping on and moving down the value chain of our IP. We find our IP to do a certain creation, a film, a series, a dream come true for filmmakers. But then we have that IP, or we try to have it, and Alexandra is helping us to keep it, and then see what we can go with it afterwards. And I think we're just in the beginning of it. We are doing sequels, we are doing maybe documentaries on the side, but it's all in the same media. And I also think there's another endless world of opportunities to also move over to other medias, books, video games. We said something about that before. We are podcast, audibles. There are a lot of different other medias where we can actually bring our IP to use what we are creating in a larger way. But we live in a frenetic world. The market is booming right now, and I don't think that right now we actually have the time to go through it, but maybe we should do. Maybe we should look.
So we should definitely think out of the box and try to be creative in terms of what we can, think of in terms of IP portfolio all along the value chain. Alexandra?
I think we usually use the IP we created, and we create other IPs in order to to promote the first IP, meaning the video games is a good example. The producers that are creating video games are not thinking about video games, they are thinking about the promotion of their film. And that's where we need to change our paradigm, way of thinking. We need to create, a real video games that is based on the existing IP. And for that, we need people, we need money, and that's where the MediaInvestEU is a good way to develop the company. But we need to look into our portfolio in order to see what are the IP that we can use. I have the example of, I'm a producer myself, and I co-produced a film in Spain, which has been remaked in maybe 4 European countries. An animation is currently produced, a TV series. It was a feature film, so it's kind of an exploitation that never ends. And that's good when you're a producer of that, because you have that. And what I wanted to mention maybe is that there is two momentum in the life of an independent producer where they can be attractive for an investor, which is at the beginning when it's promising and it's based on the faculty of that producer to attract talent and to develop new projects, and when it's older, based on the catalog of this IP. And these are really the two momentum in which we should be focusing for MediaInvestEU to accompany the industry in this growth.
And yet, surprise, surprise, there's a secondary market actually for IPs. So what's your take on this, Alexandra, Karine, of course, Rein? How can you actually worm your way into the very first level? Because we're talking about a multi-layer IPs ecosystem, right? So how can we actually worm our way into those plurality of IPs and make the most of it on the first market, on the secondary market? How can we, try to make the most of it again?
Well, one step to do is to try and support and trigger more co-productions, alliances, not only between countries, but also between different medias, to find new ways to use what you already have. And that could mean a new territory with a new market, with another point of view than you have in your own. And also the taste and flavor. We are Europe, but we are also very diverse in different countries. So one product maybe works in one country, but not in the other. So then, okay, it opens up there. Let's go there and further develop our IP into secondary uses.
Which definitely means about trying to foster better co-production across member state, of course, but also across screens and technologies. Alexandra, what's your take on this?
There is a market that is blooming. It's the remake rights IP. They have companies now that are specialized in that. So it's the beginning. I think it will grow because we, as producers, there is so much demand from the streamers, from the broadcasters, that we don't have time to create new IPs. So we need to reuse what we have if we want to answer the demands. So that market is being created. It's growing. And then I do agree. I just can echo what Karen is saying. We need to work with different medias. We need to be partners with press, for instance. I remember that it was not you, Imperfect Mother. It was a very short format that was produced by Indigo, and I think it was on the press, on the newspaper. And because I didn't want it at first, and then Rai liked it. It was 5 minutes format, and then it was on Rai website, and then Netflix bought the format to do 26 minutes. So that's exactly the example that Karen is mentioning. We need to be more cross-border in terms of a media environment.
Rain, this is a very interesting discussion we're having, especially at a time, and I'm referring to one of the panels tomorrow at Next on Marché du Film, which is going to be about metaverses and NFTs, at an area of NFT where property is totally redefined. We're still trying to talk about the IP as this super powerful cultural, industrial sovereignty tool and independence. Isn't it a little bit weird in 2022 to be trying again to worm our ways into those multi-levels of what property is all about?
Yeah, well, I think, the thing with NFTs and also is like crossing over to other medias, for instance, making a movie out of a game or making a game out of a movie. If a movie company wants to make a game out of their IP to just get more revenue for the film, then it's usually going to be a very bad game that nobody's going to play. So this doesn't work. You have to have a game company that would make the best game possible, maybe using the IP. As it is that if you want to make a movie on a game property, you have to make an amazing movie that would also work without that IP and be a good movie, and then the IP could add on. So with NFTs in specifically, there's been, since it's a very hot and booming thing, especially last year, now maybe a little bit calmed, but coming back for sure. With NFTs, the thing is that if you make an NFT to try to make money off of your existing property, then you almost always fail, because this is seen as a cash grab and nobody wants to, be part of that. It's a very short-term thing. You can maybe get away with it once, but it will never, work. So the NFTs that are actually working are the ones that do something unique and specific for this crypto community, NFT community, the kinds of people who have the ideals of the crypto, of decentralization, of owning your assets. You have to know the community, be in that community, or have somebody who is in that community to drive those NFT projects. So I think we are definitely going to be seeing a lot of movie-related NFT projects in the future, but those won't be the obvious things that you would just, make to get quick money. But this is something that are deeper in it and really build up on the values of the particular, crypto community.
Technology, huh? In a few seconds, we'll definitely dive into your questions on Slido. But before, let's wrap a little bit this panel out there. We're definitely, so the perspective of IP at this cultural and industrial sovereignty and independence tool, and how new pieces of regulation, for instance, could be created and crafted to make sure that the IP is definitely part of the European creative industries. At the end of the day, we've been, seen a lot of the trend where, of course, every single streamer and studio there is so thirsty for local content, although they're global streamers, and that they're really craving for European market audiences, stories, talents. Is this an opportunity for us all? Is this an opportunity for us all? How can we? Yeah,
absolutely. They are new clients, as long as they, let the independent producers to keep the IP. No, but as long as they respect the business model that we're having in Europe, when an independent producer has created an IP, there is two cases where they are they own the IP themselves, and they did it, they developed it, and the other one is when an independent producer has created or co-developed the IP. So in that case, we should keep it as we always do. But it brings also some good, good things about the market. When you're a producer, you dream to work with Netflix or Amazon because of the fastness of the decision, because you don't have to have 5 partners, you don't have to wait 3 years to negotiate with one of them, with all of them, and we should maybe think about how we can improve our own ways of producing film by having faster answers from National Film Fund, for instance, and faster answer from everyone. How can we take the lessons from the streamers to improve our own markets?
So would you say in a way that we've been playing Catch Me If You Can with platforms and studios, global studios in terms of regulation so far, and now it's time for Europe to take the lead in terms of course, financial tools and pieces of regulation?
Should I answer?
Sure, please do.
Of course, as the Commissioner Breton mentioned, it started with the DSA to impose to this platform the European rules. They are in Europe, and Europe has their own rules. It should be extended to our industry. There is no reason why it should only concern the information or the media freedom or whatever. As he said, our industry is super important, the creativity is super important, so it needs to be protected. And yes, we need the regulation, again.
And we need to think a little bit forward. Let me see if you do have questions on Slido. I'm not sure you do, actually, so I'm just oh, you do? Oh, you have plenty, actually. Okay. So the first one, ladies and gents, is there any particular genre more suitable than other for retaining IPs? Wow.
Karine?
But for retaining IP or developing IP? Because I
think it's definitely retaining on the question, but you can
I can't
adapt.
see it's too far.
It's retaining.
Okay, retaining. No, when it comes to retaining, I don't believe so. I think it's more about who you are dealing with who are your partners. As we were saying, we are struggling every day with the OTTs to try and get as much as possible when we are working with them. And it's not really based on what kind of production we are doing, I'd say.
A question that Alexandra will love, actually. Do you see any differences among the different streamers, Netflix, Disney, HBO, when negotiating IPs?
You know the NDA closures? I'm under NDA. No, we don't. That's an answer that we can't give because every producer is signing a confidential agreement, so I cannot answer.
Told to my lawyer. Actually, so there's another question, and we'll move on to the next segment. Is there a warranty that this tool, will not allow third countries' funds to take control of European companies? Well, I bet this is more a question to Oscar or Laurent more than anyone in this panel. So let's see the last one, which is very, very trying to read it from afar. So I'm really, guys, help me out there. Oh, yeah, you can definitely help me. Will the public partners collecting the new tax of decreed SMDA in France, for example, to be able to invest in MediaInvest? This is definitely a question for Commissioner Breton or for Giuseppe Abamonte, who will be next. It will be definitely with us in a few seconds, so he'll be able to answer all your questions, of course. Thank you so much, Alexandra, Rain, and Karine, for diving into those questions about the IP. They deserve some applause.
Thank you.
And now we're moving on. I told you this is super pacey this afternoon and the CFF here in Cannes. Let's move forward, actually, and warm our way to innovation, to regulation, and, of course, to the brand new pieces of legislation out there. Let's hear about the way forward with MIP Laurence Farang. She's a member of the Culture and Education Commission, and she definitely joins us now.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me? Yeah?
Sure,
yeah?
absolutely.
Thank you very much. I will switch to French, if you agree. Thank you very much. So, mesdames et messieurs.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased To draw the conclusions of this panel on MediaInvest, I want to share with you our European ambitions in the area of culture and investment in the cinema. I'd also like to greet my colleague,
Ninas, who's Deutsch and with German, sorry, and we have worked a lot together for European culture, and I will say a word about that a little bit later.
So, it's an important topic, cultural sovereignty and the role investment can play to bring about independence and protect intellectual property. Since 2019, we've had two main thrusts in European policies: digital transition, ecological transition. These transitions were heavily impacted, as recalled by Commissioner Breton, by the crises we've gone through, starting with Brexit and then COVID, which heavily impacted the cultural world. And now, of course, we have the war in Ukraine and the Russian aggression. All this shed light on the need for autonomy and sovereignty, which affects the world of culture and the cinema. And it's an important topic to address here in Cannes. This sovereignty entails awareness of culture and our audiovisual and cinema ecosystem in terms of the economy and our ability to have an impact around the world. We've talked about European values and the way in which we must convey them via all forms of culture and the cinema. I believe that what Volodymyr Zelensky said at the opening ceremony was very powerful and moving in this respect. The European Union has taken up the issue of recovery through its historic Next Generation Plan. 50 billion were allocated to recovery plans in the various countries. Our main ambition, well, we had a specific resolution whereby 2% of the recovery plan should be earmarked for culture. That was a political battle we waged, and it was adopted not in regulatory terms, but in terms of influence, because on average, the 2% in Europe has indeed been earmarked for culture. So that was quite a big victory for us. And today, we're talking more specifically about this other cultural recovery plan through the media plan, which was presented a few months ago by the European Commission. This is a plan for the audiovisual sector. It aims to orient audiovisual players towards available financing and to orient investors, and I imagine there are lots present in the room, and I'm truly addressing them more specifically here, to orient them towards the cultural and creative industries, which, as we have seen, needs financing, but has all sorts of markets. And this kind of panel gives more visibility to MediaInvest. We need to replace the cash flow which dried up during the pandemic. The action of Creative Europe, the European Investment Fund, is part of InvestEU. 400 million euros is quite a substantial sum. We will ensure that there are several guarantees in terms of making efficient and effective use of the funds. First of all, we have European Action for Culture. That's a political point. We want to encourage diversity, which is our specificity, sometimes a difficulty when we need to address big markets. And obviously, we have a special structure in this sector. Most of the companies are quite small. We have a lot of micro companies, SMEs, lots of freelance or independent workers. We have IP, ticketing, public financing, patronage. The financing of the European cinema springs from this diversity, these large number of players. That's why we need to respect the way it's structured. So financing for the sector means we need to have people available, funds available all around Europe. You shouldn't segment the industry, divide it up into different parts. Everyone is in the same boat. MediaInvest can orient investment towards the entire value chain, from distribution to creation, in order to structure the whole of the industry. And finally, we have this business about accessibility to these mechanisms. A lot of companies, and this is indeed a point, I'm turning to the European Commission, we have the image of being very complex, and I think that's a very important point to address. We talked about this with Commissioner Breton. We have to be able to act quickly, and ideas must be encouraged to spring forth and be quickly submitted to the public. And so you don't want to be too complex, and you don't want there to be too much red tape. MediaInvest will be respecting these principles, and it's the perfect tool to mobilize private investment. And this will help companies to become international. It will help to structure the European audiovisual sector and assist it in building top quality and creating top quality products. And Cannes is the perfect place to talk about our image around the world. We have to keep a strong export potential by consolidating the place of the EU as a leader in the cinema. We also need to ensure that the EU has a harmonized regulatory framework that entails the harmonization of our main legislative text. I'm thinking of the regulation on copyright, which hasn't yet been transposed throughout the European Union. Similarly, the directive you talked about earlier on media and audiovisual services, that's important for the economy of this sector. We have exhibition, the minimum number of European works on platforms, the possibility of platforms to finance in the various member states. We must, of course, ensure that all the European countries transpose this as quickly as possible. The political will is therefore there. Investment, clear rules, that's what the EU can do to encourage and strengthen the European protection of European culture. Now, how can we go further? Investment also is wrapped up with sovereignty. We need to look at our past creation, our cultural heritage, in other words. That's major in terms of economic stakes. It is absolutely necessary and desirable to think in depth about a global strategic policy in terms of cultural independence. I'm talking about a definition and a strategy to protect and promote our strategic cultural assets. This is a thought process underway, and I know that the whole of the industry is giving thought to the matter, just as we are as legislators. We need to protect catalogs, also our creative production and distribution abilities in the cinema, in music, or video games. This is an area which I work in Parliament. Big institutional, big international players are buying others. MGM was bought by Amazon. Activision was bought by Blizzard, etc., etc. So European IP is gaining in value, and this is whetting people's appetites. We need to protect it, therefore. After 2 years during which our economic, cultural, and creative ecosystem has become fragile, that strengthened the digital giants. Europe wants to regulate this sector. We talked about this at the beginning, and Commissioner Breton is very active. We'll be voting on a very important text in a couple of weeks' time, the Digital Market Act, which will limit the monopoly of GAFAM while preventing the creation of new monopolies which would harm cultural diversity and competition. And there'll be a second sector on the Digital Services Act, which will focus on the services side. But the combat for cultural sovereignty has only begun. Cultural resources are strategic assets, and we don't want foreign investors to make our sector fragile and take over our heritage. What I'm trying to say is invest massively, encourage investment, also think about mechanisms that might prevent predator acquisitions. I'm not talking about protectionism or preventing the circulation of capital, but I don't think we should be naive. I'm pleased that the Council, in its conclusions on the 4th of April, refers to this issue in its European strategy for the cultural and creative ecosystem. Furthermore, the movement has already begun in our member states. Big national investment plans have been set up, like France 2030, investment in studios in Italy, and Cinecittà, for example, financed through the Italian recovery plan. That shows this will in Europe with some countries that are leaders in the area. I met earlier on with the Greek minister and the Estonian minister. In a whole host of countries, this matter of investing in culture is viewed as of paramount importance, and that should encourage us to place greater trust in the sector and encourage it. So in conclusion, I would like, obviously, to thank you for your invitation. I'd like to thank the European Film Forum and its organizers and all the panel members who have said very interesting things on a wide array of topics. They've shed light on IP as a vector for growth and a tool for sovereignty, cultural sovereignty. I know that the new French government is about to be announced. This is a pretty heavy competition, but I'd like to say once again, thank you for your interest in all these topics. Thank you for your confidence in the cultural and creative sector in Europe, and it's my pleasure to give the floor to Giuseppe Abramonte from the European Commission, who's going to wind up this conference on MediaInvest. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And so, Giuseppe, of course, the Director of Media Policy at the European Commission. What are your takeaways?
Well, good afternoon, everybody, first of all. And let me tell you how delighted I am to be here in presence after 2 years of seclusion at home. And so my first takeaway is the fact, well, it's the political message, the main political message of the Commissioner and Madame Farang as well, so the need to preserve and promote our European model and our culture. Europe is the largest democratic digital space in the world, so there is something not to be forgotten. And there is a need, there is something which was very eloquently put forward by Alexandra, so there is a need to retain, so to keep our creative autonomy and retain the IP rights in Europe, meaning that there is a need to keep control, full control of the catalogues, which are key strategic cultural assets and therefore political assets. There is also a need to retain and using talents in Europe, which are very much in demand, because without talents we don't go very far. And also a message which has clearly emerged from the discussion is the sector is transforming, in particular because of the COVID crisis. And of course, every crisis brings about collateral damages, but also opportunities. And an opportunity here would be to redefine our way of thinking and think maybe more globally. So we have put in place a toolbox which has been partly announced in the media and audiovisual action plan. So the toolbox which contains, so one of the elements is a more innovation-friendly regulatory framework, which is stabilizing because we have the Audiovisual Media Services Directive, we have the copyright framework, very, very important, on the transfer of value between the platforms and the European creatives, the right holders. And now we have the DSA, which is very important in this field, because the DSA contains some new elements to be able to fight piracy, which is the real cancer affecting, or one of the real cancers affecting the industry. We also have, so the Commissioner Breton spoke about, so announced the Media Freedom Act, which will enhance media and journalistic freedom. The Media Freedom Act is very, very important because it underpins the rule of law. It underpins, by underpinning the rule of law, it underpins the functioning and the integrity of the internal market, and it fosters freedom of expression, and is important because the key message is that media is not just an economic industry, but is a sort of public good, which needs to be nurtured and protected. Now, when it comes to the economic side of it, so the economic side of the toolbox, so something which emerges that European media companies, so audiovisual companies, tend to be undercapitalized, and that's why why we need instruments such as MediaInvest, so funding tools like MediaInvest that will attract investment in the industry. So MediaInvest, I mean, it is something that Mr. Brown has very, very clearly explained, is an equity investment which will enable investment. I don't know if you got it, but it is something which is very important, not just in companies, but also in individual productions. So we have a joint venture which is created in order to fund and organize the funding of a particular production. It would be impossible for MediaInvest to invest in that production. And there was a question, you said there is a question for the Commission, if regional funds may participate in MediaInvest, and the answer is yes, on condition they join InvestEU. So you have a regional fund, so the precondition to be able to join MediaInvest will be to join InvestEU first. And finally, well, something important in MediaInvest, and I don't know if you really, so there is a very important point, is the capacity building. So because there is a lot of prejudice against the industry, it's a number of people saying, no, there is an industry which is artistic, is a bit romantic, so the risk is much higher, which is not true. So the capacity building is important to raise awareness and to raise the investment readiness of the investors in this particular industry. The final point is the need to work more together and co-produce, because co-productions travel better, and to treat thereby Europe as our continent, as our native market. And so we should be used to tap the unexploited potential of the internal market, and by doing that, we will do a number of very virtuous things. First of all, we will meet demands of consumers. We will facilitate the circulation of our works within Europe and also beyond. So we will be able to reach other markets, and this is going to be very good for the competitiveness of the industry. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much to you, Giuseppe Abamonte. And that's all we have time for this Cannes edition of the European Film Forum. Thank you so much for your for attending actually this edition. I hope you know more now about MediaInvest as a tool and as definitely a driver for more innovation in Europe.